we're trying to get done. Instead of getting it done, what results do we want? Mm-hmm. I think we will stop doing certain things that we don't understand. Not that we don't necessarily, not that there's not going to be ambiguity, but if you and I can't even express to each other what results we're looking for, do we have any, should we just start it? Hopefully it's wildly, experimental.
Yeah.
But if you're in that space where some executive has funded something, and let's just arbitrarily say it's $50 million, and the person's kind of on the line, like, I told people it would be done, and you can say to them, well, we spent $1 million, and it looks like a terrible idea. Here's the data.
Right.
That will at least drive the discussion from an investment back to an investment perspective. Instead of what can we get done, what's our next best investment?
Sure.
That really challenges a lot of the traditionalist thinking, though.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's back to, I think it comes back to culture in some way with some of the organizations and the silos that are created, and then people naturally at odds. They're incentivized to be at odds against each other in an organization. I see that happen too often where, the marketing team and the IT would definitely are incentivized in very different ways. And I saw that in the early 2000s. And then as people started to add these more digital components, and somebody showed up and said, we need an app. Well, who owns that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who owns that? Is it IT? Because it's technology.
Right.
But it's marketing our company. So is it marketing? Well, we'll create some weird middle group that will focus on it and then fight against everybody else.
Yeah, right.
Which is what I saw happen for years.
Right.
And then I think that's where, a lot of people started reaching out to, like you said, they were working out to software development shops to say, come in and help us do this thing. But where I found the biggest issue is not developing the application. It was aligning all these different groups internally around being what success is. What are some things that have been successful for you when you're that person tasked to come in and help solve that problem?
So some of it's sort of this, there's like a Nietzschean model, kind of someone says, no, we just got to get it done.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, well, give me some idea what the goals are. The goals are usually written down somewhere. They're in a PowerPoint. They're in some discussion. They're in a traditional project management charter. They're there somewhere. And you start kind of saying, well, how do we line these up, if you're going to use sprints, if you will, across those sprints, and then start showing the person, well, this result you thought you were going to get's not happening. So we can just keep investing in it. And if the person says, yeah, we just got to get it done, maybe that's the best you and I could do. But you and I both know that that just erodes the passion of the people around you. And so weirdly, you end up not getting as much done because people aren't very motivated. But if there's a way to do a little bit of rogue effort, to say, maybe if we have to do it really formally, we want 10% of our bandwidth for the next 2 weeks to invest in something that seems emergent. Now, this is going back to Jeff's comment. The visualization of information, it would be great if Edward Tufte were the speaker at every Agile conference, so he got up there, or if all the Agile people just had all statisticians speaking at their conferences for the next few years to kind of say, it's all about the data, and if you can't grok the data, what are you doing getting stuff done? If we started looking at more of that information, we might find that what we thought we were going to get done doesn't matter. But weirdly, there's this strange signal that's popping up over here on this side. And that kind of leads me to this thing that a friend of mine turned me on to a few years ago called design of experiment. So it's an industrial engineering concept where if you're trying to say, I want these results, if you don't control the whole ecosystem, like if you have a digital population of 3 million, you can't just sample 6 people.
Yeah.
You can sample a small subset of people and figure out whether the UI is right, but you're not going to be able to sample 6 people and figure out, is that the right result you want?
Right.
So if you start getting more visualizations out there, more analytics, then you might find that what you thought was interesting is not, but there's this weird signal over here. Now, that's really going to ask some of those leaders to take a leap of faith. Because they're going to be like, and the ones that don't get the data, we're going to have to do some education. I think this is going to be significantly more difficult than the Agile stuff was.
Sure.
Because it's more ambiguous. There's more mythical certainty of we got to just get it done.
Right.
Just think about how much that drives our whole ecosystem. In the back of everyone's mind, there's this weird pressure of people are billing.
Right.
That's not going to go away overnight.
No, that's going to take a long time to change. Because again, back to how people are incentivized is a big part of it. I find that if the development team is incentivized on churning through points,
right,
then that's what you're going to get.
Right.
If they know that if they get good marks for because they were churning through, they had this much velocity,
right,
then that's the type of development team you're gonna get. I invested $1 million in this ERP system to track story points and things. So what do I do now?
Confirmation bias. Show me more story points. That must be good. Yeah.
It must be good.
And story points, like, inherently didn't start out wrong.
Yeah.
The idea of customer value was baked into the points.
Mm-hmm.
The points thing, there was no way that was ever going to be successful because it got started by a small group of very thoughtful people who were highly collaborative, who often also happened to be pretty great engineers.
Yeah.
So they weren't worried about, hey, how do we get this to compile? That was not an issue. Right. It was like, how do we not write the wrong code when we start?
Right.
But it got lost because, like, I remember we used to do this thing called affinity mapping.
Yeah.
And that was such a cool way to have a conversation about a dimension of size was ambiguity. But that sort of got lost when the Agile stuff just turned into how much can you grind out in 2 weeks.
Again, I've seen people come in and they hire like a consultant and they try to get that started, or they go and hire Rally and come in with a sledgehammer and, and just hammer people into submission, right? Yeah. Because, the Rally software and their approach and stuff is great for a larger enterprise that needs a sledgehammer to come in and tear through the place. Right. The bigger the place, the better. But that's when I look at it, it has to be a mandate coming from senior executives and people that we need to make a change versus another approach like I've seen where you've got these small innovation teams that are going rogue, like you said, right. Doing this little rogue thing. And then people start taking notice and going, wait a second, how are they working? Like how I would like to work like that. I like how they're getting a lot of praise from these groups and these other ones, right. And I've seen that be successful. But
you asked a question I didn't really answer it very well. The other two things, you just named one of the things I think is really more powerful than a lot of people understand is telling stories of success, point at success, and then reverse engineer how the success happened. Yeah. That's what's really bugged me a lot about some of the, I don't know what to call them, Scrum purists, Scrum pundits. It's like they assume that because they did Scrum, they were successful. That's just bad logic. Right. They're not looking at like root cause analysis. Yeah. I think the other thing too is we've been doing a lot of work where we go in and kind of, the first thing we do is instead of forming Scrum teams, we kind of try and name for this group of people working on this thing, what is the thing, who is the thing going to impact, and what's the mapping between the parts of the thing and the teams that are going to produce it. So if it's one product and one team, then that's like when Jeff talks a lot. That's what I hear him talk about. But I don't hear Jeff really talk about the fact that when there's 60 people and they're segmented across multiple teams and there's an SAP team and a Java middle tier team.
Somebody's in India and somebody's in Mexico.
We're not doing a good job aligning teams around things so that we can measure customer impact. And that mapping doesn't solve the problem, but it sure shows a lot of the weird, arbitrary, accidental mapping up front. And you can't scrum your way out of that. You can't have small, discrete teams that are all bonded around their part if the customers don't really care about it, if you got to put together all three things.
Yeah. If I'm coaching, and I know you've coached a lot of developers in your time, what if I'm on one of those projects and I'm being moved to this team that's going to be more agile and all these different things, but I just don't like the work that I'm working on? Like, how are you, how do you coach somebody who is already a bit despondent and you're trying to create, and I've heard you talk about this before, that great teams are because of the individuals and how they're working together, not necessarily because they've got a great framework, right?
Right.
But how are some ways that you've coached maybe disengaged people within those teams before, got them more excited about what's coming?
Yeah, so I was just at this really cool conference in Australia called YOW, and I made a bunch of funny one-off T-shirts. And one of the T-shirts I made without thinking I was going to Australia was called "Death to Scrum?" I chose not to wear it. So first of all, it's probably not a good idea to wear death to anything in the airport.
Yeah, there's that, yeah.
But I thought, it's time, right? It's time to stop talking about Scrum teams. So I'm one of those developers, and I'm identified as being on a Scrum team. It's like saying Mick Jagger's in a rock and roll band. It's just so dumb. And if you think about like a music metaphor from the Twin Cities, without being insulting, I don't think anyone in Solosime was ever a very good musician, but they were a good band. Right. And they weren't a good band. When they started, they were called Loud Fast Rules, and they were like a bad version of the Ramones, but they stuck together. I think we need to help that developer, whether you and I can change it or not. Start having conversations about concepts that aren't new, like customer empathy, like product-centered learning, like human-centered design, and try and say, if you're really confident in your geek chops, then maybe the next best investment for you is to stop talking about JavaScript and the new JavaScript framework. And maybe the next best investment for you and your team would be if you not write any code for a week.
Yeah.
And go talk to people.
Yeah.
Now, that's going to upset some of the Uber geeks as much as it's going to upset the executives. And I think we're going to have sort of a watershed where there's going to be people that say, I'm a product developer, maybe a web developer, but I'm not a Java geek.
Yeah.
I think that sort of needs to go away. And JavaScript, the mess that it is sort of doing a good job chipping away at that because it's so ubiquitous.
Yeah. Anyone
can sort of sit down and do it, that if you have a good idea, you might produce some ugly, messy code that's not very testable. But, isn't that part of every great product you and I have ever been involved in? Yep. There's some part of the code that's ugly, and then we introduce the engineering side into that, just like a producer walks into the studio and says, hey, that's a great song. Let's just tune your guitar.
Yeah.
And then we'll cut to tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said about getting that developer away from the computer and in front of those customers, making them a part of that experience, not just leaving it up to the user experience team,
right,
or the project team or the product owner, whoever. Get their butts out of the seats, have them sit in an interview session where you're talking with customers, have them be at the meeting where you're reviewing the survey data,
right,
and encourage them to be a part of that discussion. I think that right there, like what you're saying, is one of the most impactful things, but it is a hard thing because we need code.
Right.
We need them to deliver the code.
I'm right. I'm in this dangerous space where I'm not sure I should talk about some of the things I'm thinking. I sort of feel like while XP got some things wrong, what was really cool is the people that were the makers were there, and the makers were trying to kind of use new metaphors like stories and customers.
Yeah.
And at that time, we still had a pretty ugly segmentation between I'm design and your development. And so as we move into this product space, one of the things that's bugging me a little bit is I'm starting to hear people say, well, I'm on the discovery team and you're on the delivery team. And it's like, whoa, that's not a small company of 12. That's not Valve, right? That's like, let's make this cool game. Let's make this part of the game really cool. Now, if you're a drummer and I'm a guitar player, I'm probably not going to say, well, let me just play your part because it's rude. But we both are bonded sort of around musicality. And so I think we need, again, more of these engineers to be able to do some of those things. Now, that doesn't mean we just slam the door on the UX side. But I'm sort of becoming dubious of the user experience team. That feels like a segmentation, sort of like the architecture team used to be those other people. And if we don't start chipping away at that, if we don't have the people that have really strong user experience skills start teaching other people, how do you know why does your intuition tell you that's wrong? Well, I've written my 10,000 hours of code, and a lot of it was crappy. The UX people that are really good have done the same thing. They've done these designs where it's like, well, that's not how people typically think about things. So I think we need to start making user experience skills more ubiquitous, the same way we started making architectural skills more ubiquitous in the beginning of the 2000s by like some of the XP ideas like collective code ownership.
Yeah.
Where it's not, remember there was this tool called Envy. It was an IBM source control tool. The irony is it was written in objects, but it was the ultimate unobject concept. So I could own a method, and you couldn't touch the method unless I let you touch the method. That sounds so bizarre today.
Right.
But you do have like Linux, where someone is kind of saying, no, we're not putting that in. I don't care how passionate you are. There's that product ownership piece.
With those different teams, you've got what I think is probably the death of a lot of good software, which is handoffs. I mean, handoffs are just there was such early processes. I mean, I remember building software in the late 90s, early 2000s. Handoffs were just part of the thing. And there was processes around handoffs. Yeah. There was big meetings. You'd have sign off. Yeah. You'd have all these different things. It is not my problem anymore. Yeah. It is now your problem. And these days, I don't see these great products being built with handoffs. I mean, I honestly, and I think I've heard you talk about Apple's process before. They don't necessarily follow an Agile or whatever, but I guarantee you there's no handoffs at Apple where they're like, okay, hardware, it's your problem now.
Right. And, Steve Jobs stories can be amazingly boring, but make the world a better place.
Yeah.
not get the project done.
It's true. And I've heard you talk before about